Hello viewers, and thank you so much for joining us once again. This is the Big Talk with me, Costa, as your host. And today we are bringing you another episode, a very fascinating one, with Comrade Rejoice Ngwenya. We just want to run through the highlights of 2025, what happened, and what direction is our country taking. I'll leave this time to you, Comrade, to introduce yourself to our viewers.
Well, thank you very much. This is a wonderful setting for thinking introspectively about what has been happening in Zimbabwe. But, I'm rejoicing. I'm basically not just generally an author, but many people call me a political commentator, but I usually prefer to be known as a political analyst.
Yeah, Let's now look into the 2025, what has been obtaining throughout the year from the beginning up to now. What we call is the highlights of the year. I'm sure you all agree with me that the coining of Zviganandas under the corruption narrative from the Vice President, retired Chiwenga, saying corruption has become a national security threat. What is your take on that kind of a description as far as corruption is concerned, and him as a potential successor to President Emmerson Mnangagwa?
I'm glad that you're talking about potential successor, because succession politics is basically based on the Congress. Nonetheless, the issue of corruption in Zimbabwe has been a major issue, even with global implications, as far back as the Mugabe regime. There's always been a feeling that the ZANU-PF government does not take the issue of corruption seriously, and it became part of the hierarchy of dissatisfaction around Zimbabwe's global status in terms of even the sanctions. Some people are arguing that part of the reason why this country is sanctioned is because there is so much corruption. Now that there is a second republic, and in 2017, 2018, Mnangagwa himself was campaigning on the basis that he was going to make corruption a top item on his governance agenda. And we were even excited when the Anti-Corruption Commission was resourced, right? And credible, retired judges were put in place. But that never saw the light of day. In other words, while the government or the president was talking about issues of corruption and how disgusting corruption is, there wasn't any commitment in so far as the government institutions themselves. There were no convictions. If they were arrested, they were very tentative. Big tenders used to be, issued out, and there was no due diligence on people. So when then Chiwenga suddenly comes up and starts talking about the importance of a governance process that has no corruption, everybody needs to sit up and listen. But the question being, whatever he's saying, can it be implemented? Because we have an anti-corruption commission, we have the security systems that are in place, the police, every institution seems to be in place. But things have been going on with just a few individuals seemingly winning all the tenders, and some of the money being taken, and people not being brought to court, others being brought to court and being given bail. So the Zviganandas phenomenon has breathed in a new life in the way that Zimbabweans should perceive the seriousness of attending to the scourge of corruption. But there are still no convictions, there are still no arrests, there are still no. It's not very clear how he's going to move this rhetoric from talk to action.
Let's talk about 2017. Here is the man who is credited for leading the Operation Restore Legacy. And we know that the message then was the target was criminals around the president. And I'm sure then it was the concern has been obvious, the corruption. Do you think there is some regret that what he was really fighting for, or there is some consistency in as far as his message against corruption is concerned?
So are you talking about Chiwenga?
Yes, the vice president.
No, well, look, I mean, in terms of our constitution, which was actually involved, you can't just label somebody a criminal without due process. In other words, if the Chiwenga movement, the 2017 movement, was around removing criminals around Mugabe, the first thing was to ensure that there is prosecution. Assuming if he just assumed that just because there is G40 that seems to be working in tandem with say the previous First Lady Grace Mugabe, if there were any criminal tendency and behavior, they should have instituted a prosecution process in order that these guys are arrested, convicted, and then removed from government. But to merely say that we are supporting a military takeover on the basis of removing criminals around Mugabe, it's a fallacy. Actually, it's too theoretical. Because who is a criminal? None of these guys were convicted. They were only persecuted on the basis that they were not supporting the
current president,
the so-called Lacoste movement. So, and then the question that we kept asking ourselves was that the person, this one who is saying he wants to remove criminals around the president, is he himself not perceived as a criminal? The same thing goes. If you label somebody criminal, the society has also a right to label you as a criminal, which is wrong because criminality comes with conviction. So Emerson Mnangagwa and Constantine Chiwenga has been involved with ZANU-PF since the 1960s. Even after independence, they were part of government. So when they are saying when they were saying they wanted to remove criminals around Mugabe, what gave them the mandate? What gave them the right? Was there any conviction and so forth? So we can say that's what under the bridge. But now that he seems to agree that after all, we knew that there was criminality around the governance template in ZANU-PF. So please, let's identify those criminals, get them convicted, and then get them jailed and arrested, so that we are able now to support. So if he's talking about criminals now, corruption, he should identify who those criminals are, who is corrupt, hand them over their names to the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, to RESA, and they get prosecuted, and then we can then start clapping our hands and say, right, Chiwenga is talking about the right thing. So this whole rhetoric about criminals and Zviganandas, if there is no legal justification based on conviction, then I'm afraid I won't be able to be part of the group that supports it.
There's an irony here. It looks like these people, I think it's now public knowledge, that these people are labeled Zviganandas pretty much appearing to be the ones who are supporting the ZANU-PF right now. I'll give you an example of one of the person who is perceived to belong to that group, Kudapashita Gure, and you see the massive support he is rendering to the ruling party. There's irony here that we are seeing, and potentially the vice president now coining and labeling those people such as Zviganandas. I just want you to contextualize with the succession politics. Now, Zviganandas appear to be in charge. You're seeing the inter-district meetings that are happening right now. What is the meaning of all that?
Do you know, Costa, the problem with Zimbabwean politics is that we tend to have short memories. ZANU-PF has always been supported by that aspect of private sector. They've certain business entities have always supported ZANU-PF.
But this is now a group that carries the tag of Zviganandas.
It was nicknamed Zviganandas, by Chiwenga. But what I just wanted to make a clarification that the mere fact that Kudata Gwire, Wilson, Chivayo, and Delshi Ngwaya, Scott Sapwanya are associated with Mnangagwa does not necessarily mean that even before Mugabe was not associated with business individuals. So they've always been there. The only difference that we have now is that if Chiwenga now feels that his ascendancy, hierarchy or template has been tampered with, he then gives himself a moral right to say, I am not happy that these individuals that seem to be carrying lots and lots of money are the ones that seem to be propping up a Mnangagwa's 2030 agenda. But we as Zimbabweans, we are not worried too much about who is supporting the 2030 agenda or what. We are simply saying if Chiwenga is not happy with Zviganandas and corruption, they should be identified, prosecuted, and convicted. But Is it a coincidence that they are the ones that are associated with Mnangagwa? No, it's not a coincidence. Why? Because in authoritarian governance, in dictatorships, the ruling party always identifies individuals that have lost and lots of money so they can sustain their programs.
And pretty much you're saying if he is serious and true to his word, he must go and report these people to ZAC, and then we wait for action, right?
Yes, because the fact that Danish Ngwaya or Chivayo gets a tender from whatever ministry, he can argue that I submitted my bid with any other. There's the National Procurement Authority. So we don't know what process these guys go through to get tenders. This is why, remember, even Kudakwashi Tagore was saying, no, you young people should be involved in these tenders, submitting your bids and all that. So the tendering process is a pretty close thing generally. The question that is being raised by citizens like myself and probably you is that, why is it that only a few of those guys are simply winning all the tenders? But the issue is that maybe those few guys are the ones that are producing, they
are performing
competitive bids.
And those who are awarding are happy with it.
Do you see what I mean? Okay. So we don't want to be too excited about what Chiwenga is saying. We can see ourselves. We see the way that Chivayo is splashing around the money. And I'm saying I know I used to do business with CZ and ZNCC. I know a number of serious Zimbabwean businessmen that are very successful, but they are not going around dishing out cars and money to party institutions. So this is why these guys called Zviganandas are attracting attention and unnecessary attention to themselves. Because instead of supporting other social, programs, corporate social responsibility, right, like hospitals and schools, they are just dishing out these cars. So they are, in fact, cementing that image that Chiwenga is saying, that these individuals, which I call Zviganandas, are the ones that are supporting you, Emerson Mnangagwa, and you are not arresting them. You carry a dossier. You take that dossier to ZRP, take it to the Commissioner of Police. Don't take it to Politburo, because Mnangagwa, ZANU-PF Politburo does not arrest anybody. So if you strongly feel that, Ngwaya, Delshi Ngwaya, whatever you call him, Chivayo, Tagore, and companies are criminals, just go to your nearest police station and report them, because that's how the processes work in a constitutional democracy. So anything else outside that, it becomes your own legal war within the ZANU-PF succession. But we as political analysts, we get excited. We analyze it. We talk about it. And I think it gives us a very good agenda for debate.
But what is the direction our country is taking with that Zvigananda and the behavior of splashing money and everything on daily basis? Where are we heading as a country?
It cheapens our politics. Why I'm saying so is because, politics is a serious issue, because it's an issue that involves people's life and death. So if there is a government that is in office that is seen to be pandering to the whims of so-called corrupt individuals, it doesn't give the government credibility. So it makes it so frivolous that we even hear sometimes that people like Kudakwashi Tagore go around promising to deal 500 balls, build hospitals, build school. And generally that is the job of government and private sector, and not individuals. And if these things are announced during political rallies, then we assume that it becomes a political program rather than an economic development program. So we are worried as Zimbabweans that if our government is being controlled by a coterie and a group of cronies who seem to be doing government business. Sometimes you even see these guys in government delegations. And you're asking yourself, in what capacity is Chivayo in that delegation going to the World Bank or to Russia or to China? In what capacity? He is not a government employee. So it reinforces this negative attitude towards this current government, that it is under the control of the so-called Zviganandas. But we have no right to judge them and convict them because they've not gone through due process. But it gives us...
Just to put it in more clearer terms, are you suggesting that these people have captured the state?
Right. If you remember, Costa, there was a lot of talk about state capture in South Africa a few years ago, and where
Guptas.
the Guptas and so forth. So you can see there's this Gupta thing that is running,
Correct.
a character that is running through that. You have a number of individuals whom we all know who publicly support. They don't support the government. Because if they supported the government, they would be worried about X-ray machines, about MRI machines, about clinics and hospitals and schools, right? But they are worried about, they are propping up the image of the ruling party and the incumbent president. So to me, that amounts to be state capture. It then translates to this. This is why when people then say, they are winning all the tenders, we say, yeah, they are winning all the tenders because they are in control of the national fiscus. Sometimes they even, in the case of Trababalas, we are told that, that consortium lent the government $80 million. How can you have a private sector entity lending money to government? It doesn't work like that. So like I said earlier on, that they bring this unnecessary attention to themselves. And the word state capture simply then applies to them because they seem to be benefiting from all the tenders. We don't know how. They seem to be appearing in all the political rallies, not in government, meetings, but in rallies. And whenever Mnangagwa is going around shopping for business all over the country, they are there in the background. So the issue of state capture, I would say, in 2025 has been very strong and has been cemented by this Zviganandas phenomenon.
At one point, the president was asked, I think he was meeting with journalists at the State House,
right,
to clear the air concerning the talk on social media to say he is backing people like this one that you are mentioning, the Chivayos. And he said no, his understanding is that people like Chivaya are philanthropists who we can then dictate in terms of how they should use their monies. That was his response. He's seeing them as philanthropists who are then, who are at liberty to spend their monies the way they want.
Yeah, true. I mean, that's even Shivaya himself says when people, I think it was Father Mahere or one of the opposition entities was saying, instead of you giving out money to Charles Sharamba, to so forth, these guys already have money. John Fraser already has his cars and everybody. Why don't you take that money and give it to a local hospital? He says, no, but it's my money and I do what I want with my money. Okay, in a normal democracy, in normal civilization, rich people do whatever they want with their money. If Elon Musk decides to give money to Kaiser Chiefs or whatever, it doesn't think. But the point really is that the word philanthropy does not apply to Chivayo. It doesn't.
Why?
Because philanthropy is not taking $1 million and giving it to a person who already has $1 million. That's not philanthropy. Philanthropy is taking money for a good cause, a good social cause. Yeah, Gyros Jiri Association, there are children's homes, there are hospitals in Mausekwa, we have whatever, there are university lecturers that are not being paid. There's we are playing our soccer away from home because National Sports Stadium is in a bad state. So there's sewage running on the surface at Matapi, right? So philanthropy then means that taking your hard-earned money and ensuring that you reverse that negative cause for a social benefit. That's why we call it corporate social responsibility. So CSR is not buying a Rolls Royce for Bishop whoever. That's not philanthropy. So if President Emerson Mnangagwa labels Chivayo and Tagwire philanthropist, he is basically wrong. That is not philanthropy. Philanthropy is a cause that is directly related to a need in society. So if I have $1,000 to give away now, and I take it to Magaya, I'm not a philanthropist. I'm shopping for favors, right? So
Did you see is it a coincidence in terms of the recipients of all these gifts?
Exactly.
Is it they just ordinary people, or do you think there's some?
You use the right word, Costa. Yes, it's not a coincidence. Why? Because you see, in political dictatorship, you identify individuals that you can use for critical leverage. In your program, right? So if you are giving out Rolls Royces and expensive cars to musicians, you are hoping one day that they will be so beholden to you, they are going to write music about you and praise you, right? If you are giving money to a bishop, if you are giving money to a church leader, You are hoping that one day with this big congregation, he can influence the way people vote for you. So this is why I'm totally disgusted by somebody who would call it philanthropy. So it is a way of trying to influence decisions around your political, capital, which is it really makes it totally disgusting.
Yeah, we would want to close this section, but they appear to be very influential in as far as the succession politics in ZANU-PF is concerned. Tagwere is now being seen as a potential successor.
By who?
You see the talk on social media is there. As a potential successor to President Mnangagwa in 2028 or after 2030, I wouldn't know. But he is seen as such. So how is this going to play out in as far as the succession politics is concerned? I want to close this section.
Yeah, I know. As a Democrat myself, I know that you are only elected into office by the electorate. So it doesn't matter how much Kudata Gure showers the ZANU-PF structures with money in Harare. When it comes to the ballot paper, Costa, the individuals are going to vote for somebody. Even in primary, I would dare Tagwere to go for primary elections in Harare province. I would dare him to go for primary elections in Shurugwi. This is how...
he can potentially be elected at the ZANU-PF Congress in 2027.
Yeah, but, by influencing those structures. But I'm saying that to be a president of a country, you are voted for by citizens. So even if he emerges as a candidate at the next 27 ZANU-PF Congress, right? So the structures within ZANU-PF that don't like him can also influence those that vote against him within ZANU-PF itself. And secondly, those that are outside ZANU-PF that are so-called opposition and fence-sitters, if they don't like it, they won't vote for him. So this is a black hole, Costa. He's putting money in a black hole. In Zimbabwe, presidents, they might be nominated by their political party, but they are voted for by citizens outside ZANU-PF, structures.
But we know traditionally ZANU-PF will then emerge as a victorious party.
Unfortunately, this is why we need electoral reform, because what happens between ZEC and ZANU-PF is what determines the outcomes of the election. But I'm simply saying, on a bright day, Costa, when votes are being counted, there is absolutely no way the bulk of ZANU-PF voters would only vote for him just because he is liked by Mnangagwa.
He is a man who has been supporting this party for a very long time.
Right.
And I think recently we have learned also that he sponsored even the military transition takeover in 2017.
So we
heard that. Recently we've also heard about him buying every Central Committee member a vehicle, top of the range vehicle. So he has pretty much positioned himself strategically
within the ZANU-PF structure. So he can easily become a candidate in 2028.
Yes.
Yeah, right. That I agree with you. It's a very simple and honest interpretation. But what I'm saying is that we have heard a lot about the Bora Mudondo phenomenon in ZANU-PF. So it doesn't mean that even if the chairperson of Shurugi province is pampered with $100,000 and money, it does not necessarily mean that those constituencies at Zimbabwe or whatever, Chibi, are going to vote for him. So it's a dangerous, trend that
investment.
But you are right. Having pampered all these structures, the individuals who run the structures with money, we can assume that when it comes to 2027, they can, all the 10 provinces will say, right, we want him. But it does not necessarily mean that everybody in ZANU-PF likes that. But who are we to judge? Money speaks at the end of the day.
And what do you think will happen to Vice President Retired General Chiwenga?
Well, I would probably say, remember, in ZANU-PF, there is no succession structure. In that, there's nothing that says once you are vice president, you are going to be a president. It doesn't work like that. Even our constitution doesn't say that. It simply says the president of the ruling party can nominate and select a vice president. When it comes to elections, general elections, harmonized elections, vice presidents are not elected, right? So, but the succession within ZANU-PF, then this is why some intelligent, analysts in ZANU-PF would say, no, why not just go for Congress in 2027? Instead of talking about, instead of Chiwenga saying, oh my goodness me, in 2017, we agreed that you would rule for 10 years and I'll take over. We were not part of that agreement, right? So if he is a man of political integrity, he should not even entertain these people like Tenba Muliswa, Kirena Mujat talking about him, Guru to take over. He should be saying, I am focusing on 2027 to ensure that at the next Congress, I am nominated, and he has to challenge Mnangagwa for party leadership, not for this current term, but party leadership in 2027. Then I can listen to Geza speaking. But for now, my ears are closed.
If you're pitting him against Tagwiri,
Pitting who?
Chiwenga and
Oh, I
Tagwiri.
see. Yeah. Well, in terms of public relations and marketing and branding, Tagwiri is well ahead of Mnangagwa. But in terms
Vice President.
Vice President. But in terms of political clout at grassroots level, I think Chiwenga has got a critical advantage of Tagwiri.
You see him as somebody who is grounded more than...
Exactly. And remember, there are these sentimental, attachments to his participation. Although we are being told now that he was given money by Kudakwati Tagwiri. We assume they were friends at that time, right? I'm talking about Chiwenga. But there is a general feeling when you talk to people that they still believe that he played a very big role in Mnangagwa's ascension into power. And they possibly can be able to, credit his political capital by voting for him if he was made a candidate. But he has to go through the first hurdle first. Is he going to manage to challenge Emerson Mnangagwa? Or if Mnangagwa is retired, is he going to be able to challenge Mnangagwa's preferred candidate in 2027? And I'm saying, I think...
Who is Mnangagwa's preferred?
What I'm saying, if Kudata Gure was Mnangagwa's preferred candidate,
can
Chiwenga challenge him? I'm sure he can challenge him, definitely.